In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is back, and we are going to share our thoughts on the breaking news that dropped on Friday this weekend. It is about Bronny James. So in this episode, we'll talk about what we think Bronny should do for this season, and we'll also share our thoughts on him as a prospect, regardless of if he plays this season or not. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. And my co-host for today is my guy, Leif Thulin. Leif took a vacation. I think you were out the country. Is that correct?
Yep, went through a few countries in Europe, Scandinavia, and then a little pit stop in Italy.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a fun vacation. I really haven't taken a vacation this summer. It's all been basketball-related trips. I got one more coming up in a few weeks when the Ignite play the team from Australia in Perth, and then maybe I'll take some trips to Europe, but it'll be definitely basketball-related. But before we get into this episode on Bronny James, wanted to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right, like I mentioned in the opening, this episode is about the breaking news this week. And a few months back, or I guess maybe it was a few weeks back, Bronny James had the report came out that he went into cardiac arrest during a basketball workout at USC. And we found out on Friday it is a congenital heart defect. According to a family spokesman, Bronny James is 18 years old. He is the son of LeBron James. And I had mentioned in a podcast a few weeks back, I think that it's in his best interest to redshirt this year. Like, there's no rush to come back. I would totally sit it out and, like I said, use it as a redshirt year, practice with the team, travel with the team, but I would not risk going out there and playing unless I had further tests. And I'm sure between USC and his family, they have the best doctors and they've done their research. But even with that, I would still be cautious. What are your thoughts on Bronny James, and what do you think he should do for this season?
I tend to agree with playing it in the cautionary sense, like you did, in saying redshirt is probably the best one for health. And also, if you're looking from just strictly from the evaluator side of things, which we're supposed to do, it's likely because of these issues and the likely further issues in trying to get him back onto the court and healthy. It's better for his stock to not play and jeopardize, fairly or unfairly, just the basketball product that you view based off the health. And obviously, the first thing you want to learn is if he's healthy. And that's first and foremost priority, both for him and for us as evaluators. It's not like a stone cold thing, but also you don't want to show a bad product on the court because you're not able to be healthy for much of the season. So if we're talking strictly about draft stock, I think it's unlikely you'll see the best version of Bronny James if he's able to and chooses to play this year. So I lean pretty confidently on the side that you suggested of redshirting and putting the best foot forward the next year. One example would be like Keontae Johnson missed better part of 2 years,
yep,
then had trouble getting drafted despite a All-American season. Like he was one of the All-Americans, the top 15 players in college basketball. And because of the years and age and the harsh grading system, but if he'd come back and he's able to make a roster and make summer league, despite being 24 years old. So if Bronny James is not able to play at a good level, like Keontae Johnson probably wouldn't have been able to do had he come back sooner, I think this is more obvious because he's 18 years old to not risk his future. Obviously, he wants to be on the basketball court, but health is first and foremost.
Yeah, and maybe I'm being a little sensitive because I'm a new father myself. My son is only 13 months old, so I'm looking at it from a father's perspective. And it's tough because, and I'm sure Bronny wants to play. I'm sure this is hard on him. I mean, like it would be for any 18-year-old that eats, sleeps, and breathes basketball, especially if you are feeling like your dream to make it to the NBA is within reach, if it's within your grasp, and for it to be delayed by a year or so, I imagine that's tough. But from the perspective of like a father or just a fan, you also just you want to be as safe as possible. You don't want to take any risk. So I want to read a statement that came out on Friday. It was from Stephanie Rosa. She is of the LeBron James Family Foundation. And she said the probable cause of Bronny's sudden cardiac arrest has been identified. And it is a quote, it is an anatomically and functionally significant congenital heart defect, which can and will be treated. We are confident in Bronny's full recovery and return to basketball in the very near future. So when she says very near future, it sounds like they may want to get him back on the court this year. Now, when you heard very near future, was that the same thought process that you had, that it doesn't sound like they're going to play it super safe as we're suggesting to have him sit out?
I take this with a bit of a grain of salt. I think that it's optimistic to say he's going to play immediately, and I think anyone would agree with that. But part of me believes that the very near future is stated because it's an indeterminate amount of time. Like it's intentionally deceiving. USC is going to dictate whether he's going to play like significant minutes or not, and his health is going to dictate if he's able to even have that opportunity. So to me, that means, like, based on what they say, that means like playing training camp and being ready for November basketball, which is when college basketball starts. That just seems unlikely to me, considering he's got a whole life to live and his parents have the wealth and the influence that they do. I feel like there's more likelihood for caution, just because of that knowledge and security that he has. And I don't know if that's fair to say, but I just feel like there's going to be more caution paid because of who his parents are.
Yeah, I mean, but for me, when I see very near future, like, I mean, Bron has always been strategic in things that he posts or that come from his camp. And I think it's strategic on their part to say very near future, which to me sounds like they are planning on having him play. I think it's risky, even from, and we'll talk about where we have him as a prospect in the second segment, but I think it's even risky in the aspect of how he's going to look for the season. I think he's probably missed, I don't know the exact date, but let's say he's missed a month, 2 months of just basketball training. I don't know if he's been on the court, but I imagine that they're playing it safe and he hasn't really been on the court. And so I think maybe he lost some time there. It's going to be, I mean, he's super young, but it may be a little bit of time for him to ramp up and get into basketball shape. He didn't travel with the team when they went on their tour of Europe, so he kind of missed out on, just the playing time and building the camaraderie on the floor. And so again, I just think it's a risk, and I hope when they're saying very near future, I hope you're right and my thought process is wrong, because I just think it's too risky to bring him back early, considering that, I mean, he went through cardiac arrest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I hope they err on the side of caution, but it's just like, why say that if it's not going to happen? It puts an unnecessary amount of pressure on the kid.
Yeah, and do you remember exactly what Jared Butler's heart issue was?
Yeah, he had myocarditis.
Okay. And he was someone that a lot of people thought was going to be a first round pick. And I mean, I remember on draft night, it was like a huge shock to some people that he fell where he fell. Now I know that that's a difference, but do you think it could be the same thing in a sense where even if Bronny does play this year, and let's say he does have a productive year, do you think teams are going to be cautious like they were with Butler?
Um, I I would imagine that he'll get extensive testing just like when Cam Whitmore fell with issues with his knees and random reports, especially with the level of fame that he's fairly or unfairly got. And the added appeal of, hey, maybe if we draft this guy, LeBron James might follow. And all this, I think he's going to get extra attention both medically and from scouting departments. So I do think there's a chance he drops because of it, but I also think the added fame and popularity that's attracted to his name is going to cause more and more attention to be put on him regardless, both whether it's physical or on the course of play or in interviews, just to learn the character and what like comes with the player. Like, remember when LaMelo Ball had extra talk about him that wasn't basketball related? I imagine Bronny James will get the same stuff, and now he's got medical to talk about. So I think he will have an unfair amount of coverage that I only can imagine actually hurts a player.
I agree. Speaking of coverage, when we return, I want to talk about Bronny as a prospect. Is he highly ranked by some scouts or evaluators because he's LeBron James' son? Or if you take away the name and you're evaluating him totally different, if his name was Bronny Smith and there was no relation to LeBron, would he be considered a first-round pick on different draft boards? Stay tuned to hear Leif's thoughts on Bronny James as an NBA prospect. But first, let's talk about FanDuel. The NFL season is right around the corner, and get ready for the NFL with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, if you are a new customer, you can bet $5 and you can get 200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Kick off the NFL season with an offer you do not want to miss. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and Locked On. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. This episode is about Bronny. And then last week I did 2 episodes on my top 30 prospects in my Big Board 1.0. We still have one more episode, and that will drop tomorrow. Well, I will round out my top 30 with my top 10 prospects to start the 2024 draft cycle. It is my Big Board 1.0. Also, you can check it out. It's on NBABigBoard.com. All right. A player that I left off of my Big Board 1.0, he did not crack my 30, is Bronny James. And even if he didn't have the situation that he's going through now where he went through cardiac arrest, I personally did not see Bronny James as a top 30 prospect to start the season. I don't even see him as a one and done, but I want to hear your thoughts on Bronny as a prospect.
Yeah, I think we align in this one as well. I don't think that the level of scrutiny he's going to see from some is going to be fair. And I don't think that necessarily the rise that I wouldn't say is meteoric, but it has been steady in this, like what was his senior year, where people were like, wow, he's better than just being LeBron's kid. And there was people that said, oh, it's just the name, not the game. I think it's somewhere in the middle, but somewhere in the middle doesn't get you first round pick, like nominations. There are so many great players, not to mention this class is heavily influenced by international prospects. And if you know college basketball, which is the thing I know best, like I know of the international players, but college basketball, I watch more than just about anyone in terms of the evaluation because I just love it. It's not for the evaluation necessarily. I love it. USC has a stacked backcourt. Like they have a senior returning point guard in Boogie Ellis, and then they have Collier. Like Bronny James is going to play if his health allows. He would likely play, but it's not the starring role that typically permits you to have the ability and to put up the numbers that you need to put up to generate the buzz that allows you to be a first round pick. Because typically players that are first round picks that don't put up those numbers are big, long wings that are on teams with like a ball dominant guard. Like think of Olivier Maxence Prosper. That's one guy to me that didn't put up numbers that wowed because of his attributes. Well, Bronny James Jr. plays a position that is occupied by two players, to my evaluation, to be better basketball players right now on his own team. And then how is he going to wow scouts to be one and done? That's just the name, in my opinion. I think he's a good player. I just don't think he's good enough to generate that buzz. So I'm firmly on the side where you are as well. And this is far predating anything with injury. I just think that it was an unfair expectation placed on a kid.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat because I think that he's good. I do think that he is an NBA prospect. I do think that he will play in the NBA as a connective tissue combo guard. I don't think, just based off of my evaluations and film study, I don't see him as an NBA starter. I see him as somewhere between a rotation player and guy that makes a roster. Now, there have been plenty of guys that were one and dones that were rotation players or maybe back in roster spots or fillers or whatever. But I just don't see, like you said, for him to have the opportunity to be a one and done as far as like the production. Because I think in like a fair training camp, which, I've every few episodes I mentioned how I believe in just fair training camps with no politics or whatever. I think in a fair training camp, I don't think that he can beat out Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier. Now, of course, USC can go small. I think Duke is going to have a similar issue this year where they're going to have to play like three small guards. There's another school that maybe North Carolina may have to end up playing some lineups where they have three smaller guards. And so it is a possibility, but I can't think off the top of my head where there was a 6'3" guard that was like the third option on the team and that was a one and done. Now, you're the college basketball guy.
I got one for you. Dion Waiters. He was the sixth man for Syracuse, and he was their most talented scorer, but he was probably not their best college basketball player. I know okay. I know I'm being a little nuanced, but you did ask for some college basketball insight, so that would be the one. But I 100% agree with your point.
And I think Dion went fourth? He was the fourth pick?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is very much a college basketball geek point. But your point's 100% right. And I'll even add to it. I think that he may be the fourth best guard on his roster. And that's not to say USC is the best team in the country. I just think they have really good guards. And so you're asking a ton of someone. I think Kobe Johnson, who's their 3, but I consider him a guard. Like the position he'll play in the NBA is a 2 guard, in my opinion, is an NBA basketball player. Yeah. And he's older and he's longer and he's already playing with 2 diminutive guards who are ball dominant. So his role is going to be more coveted by Andy Enfield, the coach of the Trojans. So I really think that's going to be a hard task to follow. Now, if Collier's one and done and Boogie Ellis is done because he's used his graduation or used his eligibility, and
he may still have a COVID year,
Yeah. I maybe. Yeah, I don't know if he's done, but likely is. Then next year he could be a 2 and done. And I'm confident in that. Like it's to me, it's just projecting to be a 1 and done is ambitious, and I think it's a little bit naive.
Yeah. Now I will say there is a guard that I have in my top 10 that could end up being in the same situation, and it's Elmarko Jackson. And so he could end up being, in my opinion, he's their best NBA prospect, but he could be in that Dion Waiters situation to where he doesn't start. And I mean, I could see some weird stuff happening at Kansas. I know Ferris is going to play a lot. I know McCullough's going to play, but McCullough's size and versatility allows him to play multiple positions. But then you got Arterio Morris, who had a really good summer for them in the European camp. But I really like Elmarko Jackson, and he could be the guy that is, the third best guard, and maybe even fourth, because you got the kid that transferred from Townsend. What's his name? Like, is it Nick Timberlake? Timberlake. But I have Elmarko Jackson. I think even if he shows flashes of, with his athleticism and size, that I think he can wow scouts and be a top 10 pick. But I think Elmarko is a different level of talent than Bronny James. I see Elmarko as a guy, if he puts it all together, he could be lead guard. Well, I think Bronny is, and I'm probably going to get killed for this comparison, but it's the USC guy, is DeAnthony Melton. That's someone who I see in Bronny. All right, when we return, I'll get Leif's thoughts, and we'll continue to talk about Bronny James as a prospect, but I'll get Leif's thoughts on his strengths and some areas of concern. Stay tuned. All right, last segment. So I wanted to get your thoughts on Bronny as a prospect. Like, what do you think his NBA role is? Like, best case scenario.
I do think best case scenario is probably like a fourth or fifth starter, someone who's used more in the role of a secondary playmaker. I don't think he's ever going to be the guy who's your table set. He's more of a table setter than he is someone that can be your true facilitator. I'm trying to think of a comparison. I think the absolute best case scenario is like Indiana George Hill.
Okay.
And it's someone that's defensively very good, offensively efficient, but not super dynamic, is a sneaky athlete and passes the ball well. But that's just not the billing that he's given because of what his name is. So I don't think it's necessarily a fair comparison. And like I said, I think that's best case. George Hill is a good player. I tend to agree. Actually, when you said USC player, I was kind of thinking of players, and I thought of Jordan McLaughlin before you thought of Melton. I don't hate that as a role as well. He's obviously bigger and probably a more dynamic athlete, but I think that's where his strengths lie. It's being solid. Like, he's fundamentally solid with good athleticism, but he's not unbelievably dynamic. He's not super big. He doesn't have any trait to me that sticks out enormously. I think he's mostly solid, intelligent, shoots the ball adequately, athletically is passable by NBA standards, and facilitation wise, I think it's more intelligent than innate gift as a passer.
Yeah, what would you say his greatest strength is, like, right now? Like, what do you think, if he were to play this year, what does he bring to the table that would be somewhat enticing to NBA scouts?
I would say a mix of athleticism with unselfishness. Like you don't see too many players in high school pair athleticism with the ability to know what to do with the court. They just use their superior athleticism to gain advantages. So I like his feel mixed with athleticism, but I think it waters down because you have to be a superb athlete to be better than athletes in college. And you have to be even more of a superb athlete to be better than athletes in the NBA. And so I just think it waters down a little bit the next level, but that would be my answer.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more on his athleticism. Like, I think he's a good athlete, but most of the times what I've seen his athleticism show is in like the open floor. Like, when I watch, I don't see like super bursty. I don't see like a lightning quick first step. I don't really see a lot of like plays above the rim. Like, for example, I think like El Marco is like a better athlete. Like, when I watch El Marco, his athleticism pops out. Even Isaiah Collier, Isaiah's not like a vertical athlete, but he has a different gear that he gets to as far as like his speed. I think he's faster. Elliot Cadeau, I mean, he's smaller, but he's faster. I think he has another gear. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
he's got a better change of pace. I for Cadeau, I'd say. Like, I think there's like a gear shift, whereas Bronny James plays at one pace that's athletic, but it's not like TJ Ford or something where he just like zooms past people.
Yeah.
Um, that was an obscure college basketball reference too.
Now TJ was dynamic. I mean, he
Yeah,
turned Texas basketball around.
yeah. I mean, that was legitimately when I was 2 years old.
Yeah, I
But
was about to say, dude, you were like
yeah,
in Pampers.
I,
Like,
I I quite literally was. Um, but no, to answer that question is more. I would say the issue that I see is that you typically, when you associate first round talent, you see them dominate at inferior levels. So in high school, you should be a dominant player who's the first option. I never quite saw that.
right.
I saw a connective tissue in high school. I project a connective tissue in college, At least if it were to be this year. So what's the appeal of drafting that as a one and done? I just don't see that. Maybe if he develops, he gets stronger, he gets better, and he's a sophomore, and the players that I project to be better in front of him immediately graduate, then he has that like rise, the ascension to having a larger role and thrives in it. That's a possibility. But as a one and done, I don't see anything more than a watered down version of what you saw in high school. And in high school, if we're being honest, that's not someone that based on traits alone seemed like a first round pick. Like there was things that you want to see because you want to be complimentary, and he plays an intelligent, advanced, mature game, but it's not dominant. Like I'd rather bet on someone that doesn't know the game well, that has dominant flashes and dominant traits.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I never really saw him dominate. I mean, even like his teammate, Amari Bailey. I saw Amari Bailey dominate in spurts. Now, I was not a fan of how he got his points and how he dominated certain games, but I became a fan later on, and he actually grew on me at the end of the season when he started getting the opportunity to play point guard for UCLA, and I thought he had a really good NBA combine. I thought he showed some flashes at Summer League. But even with Amari, I saw more high school star power than I did with Bronny. What would you say like are the biggest areas of concern? Like what gives you pause to put him in like your top 30?
Well, if he doesn't grow further, I think that means he really needs to work on both his true playmaking and true shooting ability as both a catch and shoot and off the dribble guy, because that's what that height range really calls for as an NBA player, unless you are that sensational of a defender or that sensational of a attacker of the rim, someone who puts so much pressure on the rim and on the paint that you generate so many paint touches, or you have to be like Patrick Beverley or that reputation of a defender. So to me, the thing that gives me the most pause is just the combination of height and playmaking and shooting. I think he has to become a better shooter, and I think he has to become either such a good shooter that you're confident to play him off the ball as the two guard, or he has to be so much better of a playmaker than he truly is as the top option as a playmaker to be a true point guard.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to talk to you about just let's say he does play. Let's say everything is clear. He plays this year. I want to hear your thoughts. And you kind of touched on a little bit about the enormous pressure. Like I can imagine, like, you know, it's going to be like this huge divide. You're either going to be pro Bronny, not saying like you, but I'm just saying like I could just see like on social media, just people in general, maybe even people that are like covering sports, and you know, right now hot takes and so on are like the key, like that's what sells in a sense. And so I think there is going to be this huge divide between you're like pro Bronny or all the way anti Bronny for clicks. And so how do you think that this season, and again, we're assuming that he plays and everything is fine, how do you think the attention is going to impact him and even like USC and the players around him? Because I don't know if we've seen anything like this in college basketball, where there's a guy that hasn't played a game. Everybody knows who he is, from the casual fans to where he is divisive in a sense, because there are people who think he's only there getting the hype because of his name. I don't think we've seen anything like this.
I guess two ways of looking. I'll address what I think from his perspective, then what I think how it'll impact the team. One, I think from his perspective, it's a pity because it creates pressure for him to put up individual stats. Because then if you're regarded as a draft pick, you're going to have a harder scope than if you were a freshman that comes off the bench, presumably, then you would have that view just because of his name. And now as how it impacts the team, I think maybe some players will be like, wow, it's nice not to have the pressure on me. Maybe. But I think it's a little bit divisive for a team because there's so much attention paid to one player. Like you heard about the Florida documentary with Tim Tebow. Just an analogy here. Tim Tebow was the Heisman. He was someone that was a figurehead of college football. But Florida's team talked about in the year that they came up short in 2009 how everything was about Tebow, and some of the players found that hard to bear with because they wanted names for themselves. So imagine if Isaiah Collier has a case to be the number one draft pick, and now it's all about Bronny James and the 20 minutes he played as opposed to Collier's 38. And I can see a world where immaturity and too many cooks in the kitchen, with Boogie Ellis already being an all Pac-12 performer, Kobe Johnson being an aspiring draft pick, Joshua Morgan being an aspiring draft pick in the front court. I just think it's hard for a team to stay together with the distractions that'll be posed on them. Like, you've seen far better teams on paper have slight turmoil cause them to crumple. And I think there's a lot of fuel to the fire that could really test the connectiveness of this team, just how closely knit they are, how much they trust. Now, maybe Bronny's heart issue, it helps tone down expectation, but I just think it's hard for him and the team to mesh both production individually and success as a team.
Yeah, because like you said, he is going to have some pressure on him to kind of put up individual stats. Now, the pressure of fame, I think if there's any player that's equipped to handle it, it's him, because he's been in the limelight forever. I mean, we've watched him grow up in the public eye. I mean, he's just, I mean, everything that comes with being LeBron's son, he's dealt with it. I do think he's more prepared for the fame than anyone, even as an NBA player, whether it's, just the risk you take when you're a team and you give a 19-year-old millions of dollars and free time. I think there's nobody more prepared to handle it than him. But like you said, the pressure about putting up numbers statistically. I mean, think about what happens if it's their first game of the year and it's on ESPN and he finishes with 6 points on 3 of 7 shooting with 2 rebounds and 2 assists. That is going to be the topic of debate shows the next day is, Bronny James only had 6 points, and, Kobe Johnson could have 15 and he's not going to be the main topic of that show. Boogie Ellis could have 23 or Isaiah Collier could have 17 and 7, but people are going to be talking about Bronny's 6 points. So I think that's where the pressure could impact not only him, but the team. All right, last question. So I don't know if you've done a big board yet, but again, prior to him, passing out last month, where did you have him on your big board or your mock draft, and what range did you have him?
I haven't constructed one yet, but I was definitely in the not first round boat just because of I have a difficult time as someone who loves college basketball and knows the landscape of the Pac-12, knows what USC is bringing back, projecting him to have a large enough role to put himself in place to have a chance to be a first round pick. Like the traits and measurables you have to have if you're playing reserved roles is really, really hard. Like Patrick Williams went 4th overall, but even then he still scored 10 points a game, shot 82% from the line at Florida State on a team that was very, very good, was a number 1 seed overall before COVID wiped away that tournament. Like, for him to be a first round considered player, he'd have to measure in with a ridiculous wingspan. His defense would have to be outstanding, and his shooting would have to be outstanding, and likely would have to emerge into a starter. I just think it's really hard with the foreseeable role that I see for a team that has aspirations to win the Pac-12 to carve out a role that is conducive to that kind of projection that so many people have erroneously thrown as what has to happen. Like, it could happen. It would be awesome if it did, but I think it's poor. I understand why, because they need to get clicks, but I think it's poor journalism to put that much pressure on someone because of who his dad is, and to put that much pressure this year, considering it's more likely than not it'll be next year or a year beyond that because of the escape of basketball. I just think people are ill-educated about that.
I agree 100%. Man, it was good to have you back on. I missed our sometimes daily basketball conversations, but we're back in action. You're back in the States. We'll have to catch up on your travels and your experience, but glad to have you back on. And thank you, the listener, for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Rafael Barlowe with Leif Thulin. We are out.